Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Take Care with Moom.
With Dione and Rachel. I don't think the two of them need any introduction at all. Neither does Love Bonito, to be honest.
Not at all.
So we're gonna skip that part and just get into how we met Dione and Rach.
Yeah. It all started with us because we got introduced through Jamie from the Paper Bunny to Rachel. But there's a bit of backstory about how much courage it took Mili and I to email Jamie to ask for an introduction. This was like almost 6 months in the making.
Yeah.
We had started Moom already. We had like thought about, okay, I think we're gonna raise some funds now. Oh, how cool would it be if we got Rachel on the board of
And
Moom?
every single time Maya said that, like classic older sister, I was like, are you ridiculous? She's never gonna respond to
that's
us.
never gonna happen.
What?
And we're like, okay, maybe we should ask someone who knows her. Like, you know who actually seems really friendly with her? Jamie. And we had met Jamie a few times at that point, but honestly, we were not as close as we are with Jamie now. So it was a bit of a reach. Randomly,
we went to coffee
and
it came up and she was like, oh, I can introduce you guys. And we were like, oh, that would be so great. Thanks.
We
casual.
played it off really casual, but in our minds, we're like, yes!
Literally.
So you played it cool.
Yeah. Rachel was a huge celebrity in our heads. So was Dione, by the way, which comes in later. But anyways, we got an introduction and somehow Rachel responded to our email and we were like, oh my gosh, she's actually talking to us. This is crazy. She invited us over to the office and we were like, okay, let's prepare all these decks.
2021.
Yeah. Let's prepare a deck. Let's bring all of our products. Let's be like super professional.
We had like all our numbers in our head. We were like ready to go. We walk in and Rach gives us like the biggest hug. And I was like, oh, I was expecting like a handshake, very formal. I was like, oh, I like the start of this meeting already. And then we were like, oh, should we project? And she was like, no need. And I was like,
do you have a laptop? Just show me the laptop.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, where are your products? Like, let me see the product. Yeah, Moom is super interesting. Like, really chaotic energy between the three of us. 10 minutes go by, all of a sudden she's like, hold on a second, I need to pull Dione into this meeting.
I was like, hold on a second, I need you to meet someone.
Yes.
She's gonna be the game changer. And after that, I left the room.
yeah. And you just left us in there. And we were like,
And then Mili and I, the minute you left the room, we're like drenched in sweat.
I know.
Like, oh my gosh, she's bringing Dione in, like the CEO. Like, we're so nervous to meet her. We wouldn't even think she was like in the office right now. It was just like chaos. We're like, oh my God, do we need to like recite all the numbers again? Like, we know that she's like really
we're
good
like
with
frantically
numbers.
going through this deck while the 4 minutes that Rach is not in the room.
Dione comes in the room, is like so confused. Like, what is happening?
I think I remember that.
Yeah, so
Probably
she was in
had
the middle.
0 hits up.
She was, yes, it was unplanned.
Yeah.
So she was in the middle of something. I was like, Dione, this is a meeting you're gonna
Pull
not
me out
want
of
to miss.
something.
Yeah.
She said, are you sure it's worth my time? I said, yes, please. Just give me
Context,
Just give
Yeah.
me 10 minutes. You're gonna want to meet these two women. And she said, okay.
And we like continued to present Moom.
Then like another
Will-
team member got pulled in all of a sudden, like the head of finance. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? I was like, I thought we were just like pitching Rach over here.
Yeah, we walked out of there almost feeling like it was a done deal partnership between
Yeah.
Love Bonito and Moom, which was never in our wildest dreams did we even think that was possible.
Exactly. I think so many people always ask Maya this, like, oh my gosh, how did you meet her? And Maya's like, we're so annoying.
Yeah.
Like we just asked.
just
and even
asked.
today, like we're so lucky to have both of you as mentors. And we ask you guys for the most random things. And Maya always has to remind me, like, I mean, the worst thing she's gonna say is no.
But I think the other lesson we learned is the two of you are extremely special, not
Yes.
only as individuals, but as a team. We saw that in the first meeting, the fact that you could just like pull Dione into a meeting and have this like very hilariously chaotic energy also gave us a level of comfort of how we wanted to run a business as
Yeah.
well. It was very casual. It felt very heartfelt. And I think that you're very special in the sense that you do say yes to things. You're open to speaking to people. Like if someone came up to you and asked you a question, you would actually answer it. I don't think everyone does that. So
Yes.
we want to say thank you.
Yes. But I think really highlighting that relationship,
Yeah.
that is something, I mean, honestly, not that many people know the two of you as the two of you in your one special unit. And I think Maya and I have been so lucky to get to know you guys, honestly, very simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so I think something that people always ask us is, tell us your love story because Rach, maybe you can start. Like, how did you guys meet? How did the sparks fly?
Did the sparks fly?
I know. Did they not? Like, it genuinely is like a love story. Like, I mean, it's more romantic than me meeting my husband, honestly, at this point.
It is.
Okay.
And Bharat is a very handsome man.
Thank you.
I always tell
Feel
Mili
like
that.
Yeah, I think love story is such a sweet way of putting it because I think looking back, I think Dione and I really, this is more than just a professional relationship.
Yeah.
And I remember meeting Dione, this was maybe like 8+ years ago now, at first at a networking event. And it was a dinner and I didn't get to speak much to her at that dinner, but something about her struck me. And I was like, she seems very interesting and mysterious a little bit, and I wanted to just get to know her better. That was also my personal goal of intentionally surrounding myself with people who are smarter than me in so many different ways, and who think differently from me and who dare to challenge me. And from the beginning, Dione had no qualms speaking her mind about, when I would ask her honestly about, the brand, her thoughts, some marketing ideas back then, and she would give it to me like it is. And I really appreciate it because few people will also, tell you the truth of things. And that was what I really appreciated. And that was, to me, so secret and precious that I told myself, whatever this becomes, I just want to make sure that I keep her close to me in life and at work. So that was how it started. It wasn't like from the get-go, oh my God, I need her as our CEO.
Right.
It was more like I want to continue being close in whatever proximity to her. Because back then she was actually leading up Sephora in Asia, and she can share more about that. But that was how the friendship, the relationship began. And every month, at least, I will make sure that, we spend time with each other.
Dione doesn't
hanging
remember
out,
this.
Of dates.
drinking, and talking.
Did she tell you that she catfished me?
No, but
Because I love my alcohol, right?
That's
So every
a strong
month we
word.
were always meeting, and she was like, "Oh, gin and tonic," and she was my gin and tonic buddy. And only after I joined, I realized, oh God, she doesn't really appreciate her alcohol.
I don't
she doesn't drink
drink.
already.
I don't drink.
But during those meetups, it was like, oh, gin and tonic,
Yeah, I'll be
another
like,
cocktail,
oh,
another
sure,
cocktail.
sure,
Now
of
it's like
course.
tea, water, warm water, please.
And like, no bars, please, no bars.
Oh my
But
God.
that's what it takes to get into someone's world. I
was the
sacrificed my
lesson?
liver.
What was the
Catfish.
lesson, Rach?
My lesson is sometimes if it doesn't hurt you too much, you need to go out of your way to speak their language.
Yeah, that's
and that's
true,
how
that's true.
how connection builds. So
And
every
Dion's
month,
language was gin and tonics.
no, she would unwind better,
Yeah.
with a little bit of alcohol every now and then.
Okay, so the 8th month hits, and then you join LB. How did that happen?
Oh no.
No.
The 8th month hit, and I had the courage to plant a seed to Dione that, hey, maybe since we also get along very well and are very complementary in terms of like personalities and, very aligned in values. And what struck me, I remember very clearly, was I thought to myself, she's very special because she's not just someone who wants to do a job well. She's someone who actually wants to build something meaningful and impactful.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so rare. And so then I was like, okay, I'm gonna miss the shots that I don't take, right?
Yeah.
So might as well just try. And I thought by then it was good because we had a two-way sort of getting to know each other, like interview, like getting to know each other very well beyond just how we think about work but life. And so I just like, hey, actually Dione, like, wouldn't it be great if actually you come on board and even execute some of the great ideas that you have? And it was a win because she didn't reject me. And she was just like, yeah, let me think about it.
Okay.
And then that was the beginning of genuinely pursuing her in that sense of like, I really think that she would be a game changer and a bar raiser for Love Bonito.
Yeah.
And when I had that conviction and clarity, that was also when I started to speak to the board.
I remember very clearly before LB had actually invested in Moom, but we had these conversations. I went to a talk of yours with Rachel Lim. You had interviewed her and you had invited me, and Maya wasn't in town. And I went, and I just thought that it was so. You guys talked about how
Yes.
you both kind of realize that you're not CEOs, but that you're amazing founders. And I think that, not to kind of segue into, something a little bit different, but I think it's super interesting. It was very interesting for me to understand when you had that click.
Yeah.
Because Maya and I have not titled C titles yet. Like, we're still co-founders.
Yeah.
If we have to be, we're co-CEOs. We're just co-everything right
Yeah.
now. And I always think, like, I don't know if we ever have to title it like that, or that I don't know if I want to be a CEO. And I feel like founders are always just expected to do it.
Yes.
Like, it's like, you should.
Exactly
You're supposed
that.
to. It's yours.
And if you don't, it's almost like there's something wrong.
Wrong
with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was what I experienced. Love Bonito officially was founded in 2010. And in 2016, 17, 6 years in, there's been no CEO at
Right.
all.
Yeah.
It was just unofficially, of course, as co-founders, we were steering the ship,
Yeah.
running the organization. And I've always felt like this is such a sacred title to have. And of course, if I had the abilities and capabilities, I would love to step into this, to me, very prestigious and sacred role. But I think it takes, and it took a lot of deep, honest work, self-awareness, and a lot of egoless clarity to just
Yeah.
put my ego aside and, just deciding that, okay, putting all of that aside, what is the best decision for the company?
The business, yeah.
For the business. And I came to the realization that, wow, it's, even as a founder, as I continue to evolve with the company, the role that I play evolves. And I owe it to the business at this stage to bring it to its fullest potential. And that means me focusing on certain other areas, but bringing in on board then a true CEO to run this and steer this and just, lead this.
Maya and I always say this, like, we're not saving lives. And I do think when you meet a lot of, whether it's founders or you even listen to podcasts or whatever it may be, like, people really take, like, if you are not working 9 to 9 and then you don't work from midnight to 3 in the morning and wake up at 6 a.m. to then go on a run and, do all of the things, like, you'll fail.
I think for me, it's just been just always singing your own tune, right? I think maybe there's I don't know if there was a set way to operate as a founder or as a CEO, but I don't think, looking at me also, right? I think with my septum piercing and my tattoos, I think I've just never bothered or honestly actually just thought so much about it in that way. So I just naturally, genuinely just didn't care so much about that. And it was just more about always doing the work, more the mission, right? And just trying to do the right thing for the company, right? And the team. I think it just ultimately boiled down to that. And if people don't, I don't know. I contemplated, once. I was like, for fundraising, should I change the ring maybe to a half ring so I can flip it in?
Yeah.
She
Right?
did think about that.
No, I think that's a really
Yeah.
interesting thought. It would go through my head too.
Yeah, but I'm like, well, I guess you also run a fashion company. And if you want sort of like,
Authentic.
a very, a very stiff, management team, and if that's what you're valuing, then
That's not. You let your work do the talking, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think she is a great crisis leader. And I am someone who wears my heart on the sleeves, which I've had to learn the hard way through my journey as a founder, and had to learn really to train it like a muscle of, like just equanimity. For a large part of my journey, my whole life and nervous system was always constantly on edge.
Yeah.
If the business were to do well, I'll be on an emotional high.
Yeah.
And if the business were not to do well, I'll feel emotionally I'm crashing.
Yeah.
Like it hits me really hard.
Yeah.
And I just find that it's unsustainable. I honestly thought at some point I'm going to get a heart attack because it's always just like ups and downs. And I would tie my emotions, my mood, my worth to, at every stage of the business at every month.
Yeah.
So, and I think when...
I'm
Maya's
laughing because
that's literally
this is
me.
Mili.
It is.
Yeah.
And so I've had to learn the hard way to, calm myself down, whether is it through breathing exercises, journaling, or just reminding myself to just focus on what I can control.
For each of you, I guess, to wrap this part up, what is your number one practice that you do for yourself on a daily basis that's maybe work related, like not necessarily personal related, to make sure that you are showing up as your best leader self in the office for the team? And maybe you guys can be a little specific to tangible things that other people can also try for themselves.
Yeah.
I start my day, always setting very clear intentions. And then it breaks down very specifically into my priorities for that day. And then things that I want to achieve. It could be a task.
Yeah.
It could be maybe key points also that I want to land in a certain meeting. But I try to plan that out first in my Notion, like early in the morning, before even I walk in. So that I'm super clear. Because I think, as you said, sometimes it's hard, right? I think you walk in and you're like, oh, okay, sure, right? I'm feeling okay. But the moment, I guess, the tides get busy or crisis happens and there's always something happening, right? And there's always something new happening. I think it's, sometimes you just get distracted or honestly, you just forget, right? And maybe urgent stuff comes in and you just forget what's important. So I then go back to my Notion, actually.
Yeah.
Middle of the day, right? End of the day,
actually
or
a good
before that
one.
meeting, just to ensure, did I actually achieve the important things I want to achieve on this
creating
day
like a
when I come
to-do
in.
list before you even enter the office.
Yeah, 100%. Super
love
important.
that.
And then just changing that frame of mind. So when I take my Grab into office already, it's already then you're zoning in,
yeah.
right? And tuning in already. Yeah.
I think for me, I realized that my life or our lives moves in the direction of our strongest thoughts. And when I wake up in the morning, right, sometimes it can get quite chaotic with preparing Ollie for school, getting him out of bed, getting him out of home, and then also taking some quiet time to myself while making coffee to pay attention to how I'm feeling or what's troubling me or what's making me excited, And then I think how I also try to have a lot of control of what I feed my mind because it influences what I think about is through reading or listening to podcasts. So that is something that has been a non-negotiable, yet a game changer for me, where in the morning when I get ready, when I'm, getting ready after shower, I just leave it on. So it fills my mind with what I want to think about. If I'm going through a certain something that is perhaps making me very anxious, I would specifically tune into maybe like a Tony Robbins podcast, and then that really sets me up and helps me reframe my mind. And I find that when my mental state shifts, I am able to physically, emotionally, and mentally do more positive work or behave more positively. So that for me is it's been a ritual that has been so life changing, and I heard it from Oprah at first, right? And I remember her saying especially like what Dione and I, when we get to work now, we try to also ensure that you don't leave it to chance. Oprah said, when you're getting to work or when you're in a cab or whatever, why do you listen to the news where it makes you anxious and worried, or why do you leave it to chance to what the driver is listening, like whatever radio station, and not that it's bad, but maybe for high-performing individuals, everything that you listen or read, it actually affects you consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah.
So if you can control that, why don't you control that? And that is also how I also think about it. Like, it really sets me up. It's like someone giving you a pep talk, or allows you to refocus or reframe or give you a different perspective that you really need on probably something you've been so troubled about.
Okay, so now we're going to get into part 2 of this episode, which is transitioning a little bit away from the business and the two of you as amazing leaders and co-founder and CEO to more your women's health journey. This is a Moom podcast. And I think both of you have gone through very interesting experiences, and I think experiences that the audience would love to hear from, both as your perspective as being a leader, but then also just your own personal journey. So Rach, maybe we can start with you.
Yes.
You have spoken previously about the ectopic pregnancy that you had, but it would be amazing if you don't mind sharing a little bit more, even just giving a little bit of context to listeners so that they can understand kind of when this happened, how this happened, why maybe you think this happened.
Yeah. So this was before I had Kira, my daughter, and this was maybe 2.5 years ago now. And after Ollie, we've been trying for a second kid, and I actually, when the ectopic pregnancy happened, I actually did not realize that I was pregnant.
Wow.
I only realized when I had severe cramps, and I thought that, okay, it might be my period, being heavier this month. And I had really bad cramps for about 2 or 3 days that I tolerated with. And then I started spotting. And I thought, okay, maybe my period is coming. I didn't think too much about it. Until one night, I could not like get up from the pain. It was excruciating. And that was when I knew, okay, something is wrong. Leo immediately sent me to the A&E, and, they did lots of checks. And that was when they realized that, oh my God, you're pregnant. And we did not even know. And secondly, you had just lost the pregnancy because, it was an ectopic pregnancy.
Do you mind just explaining what that word means? Because
Yeah,
I think a
so-
lot of people don't know.
Yeah, I also did not really understand this, and it only happens to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think it only happens to 1% of pregnancies, where the egg is etched into one of the fallopian tubes.
Yeah.
So that was what happened, and it exploded. And I was already bleeding so much internally, according to the doctor, that he needed me to go for an emergency surgery. And there, I was, just trying to process everything and digest every information that was given to me. And there I was, also lying in the surgery bed with all my attire changed, and he was reading to me all the risks of the surgery and asking me what time was my last meal, because technically you're supposed to fast at least X number of hours, but, and reading all the risks to me. And I was just like, all I could think about was messaging Dione.
To-do list for me.
No. And really, I was there then. I was wearing everything, the gown and everything. And he was just saying that there are certain risks that this will have. And so, of course, and I just thought, okay, maybe, the worst case scenario, that since there's a percentage that I might not make it, okay, I took out my phone, I took out my notes app, and I typed a whole long paragraph to Dione. Firstly, just so grateful for who she is and that Love Bonito has her, and also just my last words to her on Love Bonito, and trusting that she will carry the legacy of Love Bonito through. And because she's also Ollie's godmother, I also added a few stuff. Please help me make sure that Ollie is. But that was then in the hospital bed when I realized, wow, firstly, I am so privileged and grateful to have Dione. And secondly, the first thing you think of when you're literally, for me back then, was almost like life and death, was like, wow, what do I want to say? And I realized I have so much to say to her as an individual and also for Love Bonito.
I have a follow-up question on the health side of things. So walk me through, you have these awful cramps, you're bleeding, you say, okay, something is definitely wrong, I need to go to the hospital.
And I think the lesson for me was I had really tolerated it for perhaps 2 to 3 days. And
Right.
I've always prided myself in just pushing through and having a high tolerance of pain. And the doctor did say that if you had come in earlier, maybe, it wouldn't have gotten to this extent where you needed an emergency surgery and was at risk because you were bleeding so much internally. So then my own lesson was also that, hey, maybe at this stage of my life where I'm also not just responsible for myself, I'm also responsible for kids and my family, also to just maybe pay more attention to my health and listen to the signs. Because as they say, the body keeps the score, and the body will always tell you when something is not right or wants to, tell you something.
But I think that also kind of is, again, a mindset thing that, I don't know, I can't speak about men, but I think women, it's like, oh, I have really bad cramps for 2 days. I shouldn't complain about this. I need to just deal with it.
Yeah.
Whereas or I have, I don't know, even if your knee is really hurting. I was just speaking to someone whose knee was driving them insane for a week or 10 days, and they now have to get ACL surgery. So it's you feel like, oh, it's okay, I can be that strong and just push through it. Whereas actually I think what all of us need to do is listen to our bodies and what our bodies are telling us, because I truly think they do tell you quite a lot.
I find the fertility journey and just pregnancy one of the most interesting topics to discuss, only because, at least for me, I was taught at such a young age, okay, the biggest thing is don't have sex because you're going to get pregnant. Then you grow up and you're actually, it's really hard to get pregnant. Infertility is so high.
You should try as soon as
you should
you're
try
ready.
as soon as possible, because if you're too old, then you're not going to get pregnant. Oh, and then miscarriages happen all the time. And then there's this whole idea of ectopic pregnancies that nobody talks about ever. And I think obviously it's really interesting to talk about what you've learned from that and listening to your body. But I also think just the idea of what an ectopic pregnancy is just important to discuss. You've explained it, but I find it all very interesting because we don't learn any of this. Like, you really don't learn anything except for abstinence. And, okay, get pregnant soon or else, like, you're not going to be able to have kids. But anyways, that's just, like, my little takeaway from the pregnancy journey.
And I think that is a perfect segue into Dione. You have
Into Dione.
into
Into
Dione.
Dione.
Into
The
Dionne's
pregnancy.
Exactly.
fertility journey.
Pregnancy.
Yes, your pregnancy.
Your hopeful future pregnancy.
Do you have any announcements for us? This is gonna be a real
You heard
clickbait.
it here first.
Just kidding.
You heard it here first.
This podcast has a lot of fake news.
Okay, Dione, as of 10 days ago, has frozen her eggs, and there's a lot to talk about there, I think.
Yeah, thereabouts a week. But I mean, I think sitting here listening to you, right, I think first of all, okay, I guess I don't know if everyone knows, but I'm queer. Right, I haven't dated, I guess, men since like, I don't know, I was 20. And I've been quite open about it.
Yeah.
And I feel grateful about that because no one bothers to ask me when am I getting married and when am I gonna have kids.
Yeah.
Right? I think they've sort of just given up on that. So I don't really
doesn't
but
make much sense, to be honest.
yeah, but I don't really have questions, so I don't feel that pressure. I guess sometimes also in society and with
Yeah.
family. But so I chose to freeze my eggs. Honestly, it's been quite a journey, right? I think first of all, and egg freezing is actually pretty new in
Yes,
Singapore,
in
right? If you
Singapore, it
remember
is
how
very
the
new.
regulations have
Yes.
changed, right? I think we've talked about this a few times. Oh no, it's getting me riled up. So
Almost I couldn't catch up until Dione
Yeah, yeah,
reminded
yeah.
me of the
100%.
new
Yo,
regulations.
I think
It's
we'll
been
all be very
up and down in
Yes,
Singapore
yes.
regulations.
Yes.
And for those people listening
Yeah.
in Malaysia, you actually can freeze your eggs in Malaysia. so.
And I think I was probably very surprised, right? I think when I
Yeah.
first heard everything, like, oh, how and learn about egg freezing and how it wasn't even allowed in Singapore, and you
Yeah.
can only do it right in the past if you're married first, right, for health reasons, and if not, actually, you can't actually even choose to freeze your eggs, right, as a single woman. Which I guess I find pretty regressive.
Yep.
And then only when the regulations first changed, but they changed with the age limit first of 35. I
Yeah.
remember reading it, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I guess I'm past the age limit. At first it was a little bit like a yay, and then like, oh, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Right? But then very soon after, of course, I think there was a lot of like discussion and debates about that, right,
Yeah.
in the news. I remember still posting quite angrily on IG. I was like, oh, this is like terrible, right? It's so horrible to
Yeah.
be a single female
Right.
in Singapore.
And like restrict her in that way.
Yeah, who really also wants to plan a family. It's so sad if you have no love and then now you can't even plan forward, right? Think about it. Isn't that pretty?
I mean,
isn't
there's a
that
couple
pretty?
of things we can
pretty,
talk
yeah.
about
But
then,
isn't that
yes.
pretty like tragic?
Yeah, definitely.
It's so tragic. And then I mean, fortunately, in a way, I think they've upped the age limit, which is 38. So I chose to start on this journey since
Yeah.
last year because I'm like, oh God, I'm 37 now, and I'm already hitting right the limit.
So both you
Yeah.
and your partner have decided to freeze both of your eggs?
Well, just me because Shan is above the limit. So
Yeah,
Shan's
Shan-
already
Shan's
42.
right,
So like she's never making it.
love
She
you.
has to do it
Yes.
overseas if she wants to, right?
Right.
But I mean, the process was. I think first of all, I guess the process was a little bit like it's still quite new, right? So you
Right.
don't really know where to go. I think I'm fortunate that a friend and actually an ex-colleague of ours went through that journey.
Yeah.
Right. And she also had a doctor that she recommended. But for me, I guess being queer, I was also like, do you think she's open? And that doctor is
Right.
also like LGBT,
Yeah.
friendly as
Yeah.
well, so that they don't judge me right in a conversation. Because I think the last thing I want to do, sitting there on the table with your legs wide open is like be
Yeah.
judged. So yeah, I think it was helpful just to have I think some friends, some contacts that I knew that I guess they've gone to that doctor before,
Yeah.
they're open, but I think you always have to give it a first few appointments,
Trial,
right,
yeah.
to find out. But yeah, I think that was that journey, starting on that journey, and I think being 37 and going through that journey is, I know that if I'm pregnant, it's basically a geriatric pregnancy, right? Because I'm old, like that's what the doctors classify you as
Yeah.
already.
Risk is
Yeah,
a
Yeah,
high risk.
it's a high-risk
and going
pregnancy.
into the process, I mean, very stressful actually, right? I think for me, but I've learned also to like just do it and part time for it. So I actually I started it since last year.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, fine, right? I'm not gonna really plan, but I want to freeze my eggs, right?
Right.
But then I soon realized that I really have to plan and commit proper time to it,
Because it's hard.
you actually
Because
need
it
to commit
depends on
time. Maybe
your-
not.
your
You have to
period.
choose
Your
also
period,
not
yeah.
to travel, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
how it works is like day 1 of your period, you tell the clinic, right? Day 2 of the period, you go in, right, for stimulation, and that's when you start injecting yourself, right, every day till the point you have enough eggs
So
But
how
then, of
many
course,
days did
it
you?
depends. So it's like
okay.
10 to 15.
Right.
And then in between, you go for checkups with the doctor for them to check actually if you have number one, like healthy egg growth and like is everything
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
right? And then they do the blood test to also just double check that everything is okay. So you actually have to be, in the same place for a period of time. And then you go through the extraction, right? So midway, actually, oh my God, it was an emotional roller coaster because I realized like going through this process, the more I thought about it, I've never had erratic periods. But the moment I went through this process, every period has been either very, very early or very, very late. So I couldn't
Wow.
plan. I couldn't plan until the point I told Rach, I was like, oh God, I think this month I'm just not going to travel. I'm just going to be here because every single time I'm trying, like it just fails because I'm either overseas and then my period comes. And I'm like, oh God, I miss another month.
Right.
And soon I'm going to be 38.
And it's interesting
Yeah.
you say that too, because stress has such a high role
So much. I never
to
realized
play
how
in
much.
not only
Exactly.
your periods, but also fertility
Yes,
in general.
yes, exactly. And the more I thought about it, the worse it got, right? Till March. And then midpoint, I remember going in for the checks, midpoint, and she was like, okay, so the number of healthy eggs you hope to also get at the end and freeze, right? would
Yes.
be, at least like maybe like
Like,
15,
yeah,
right?
10 to
around
20,
thereabouts. Yeah,
right?
10
Yeah.
to 20, sort of 15, that range.
This is
Midpoint.
assuming that you would probably want more than one child.
No,
No,
because-
just to
Oh.
increase the chances for even like,
Ah.
yeah.
So
yeah.
maybe we can explain that a bit first.
Yeah.
Just because you freeze your eggs, first off, does not mean that you're 100% guaranteed a pregnancy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The egg has
Yeah.
to catch.
Yeah.
And out of however many eggs that are frozen,
Yeah.
it's very likely that only one or two will actually make it to an
Yeah.
actual pregnancy.
Yeah.
So you can catch 20 eggs, but maybe just one actually works. Yeah.
Yeah. So even for mine, like, so midway, what happened was like, they were doing the scans and they're like, oh gosh, like, I guess it shouldn't be a surprise, but at this point, you only have sort of like 4 that are forming well, 2 sort of like newer, smaller eggs forming. But at midpoint, I only had sort of maybe max 6, right? So I really got so worried. I was like, oh gosh, right? How many eggs I'm gonna have? And I'm gonna have less than 10, right? Which is like a healthy amount. So for my case, actually, versus like my friend, I had to continue the injections for more stimulation because I
Okay.
just needed more of that stimulation, right? Before the extraction. Ended up with a healthy number, actually. Right? 14,
Congratulations.
yay, 14. But through
Yeah.
that process, right? Because there were 14 mature eggs. But the end, like 5 were not mature, right? Which means they actually can't be fertilized. 2 were sort of like defective. So yeah, you can't use them. So they don't
Wow.
even bother freezing them, right? Because it's just a waste of money. I think just to answer Mili as
Yeah,
well. So,
no.
but to be honest, we don't do like things like genetic testing and anything.
Yeah.
there.
Right.
So I actually also don't know
No.
at this point, to be honest,
Yeah.
like, what percentage of the 14 are truly healthy.
Healthy, yeah.
Yeah, no idea. But I guess the 14 are
Fingers
frozen
crossed.
somewhere in a
Yes.
clinic now. Yeah.
During that process, so I guess it took you almost 2 weeks, right, of injections over 10
Yeah.
days. What were some of like the side effects you felt? Like even
Yeah.
going into it, was there anything in the
Yeah.
process that like you really had a lot of side effects? We hear a lot about like bloating.
Yeah.
During that time period?
Oh, terrible. Okay, yeah. So the start. I mean, first is getting past the fear of injecting yourself. So
Yeah.
Shan and Shan had to travel for work
Oh my
after like
gosh.
day 2 or day 3. So I literally I had to learn how to inject myself, and I was like, oh God, Shan, you're always traveling at the worst timings. So Shan injected me the first 2 days, right, and then the second day, I was like, okay, please watch. I'm gonna try because I need to do it myself
Yeah.
right, from now on. But I think the moment you get past that, it's actually not that. It's actually really not that bad. It's not that painful. I think it's
Yeah.
just getting past that fear. But midpoint, so I kept thinking I was okay. But then I felt I was okay. But then midpoint, I realized that I was a lot more anxious every day. So I wasn't a calm Dione, No. Walking in, I really felt, and I told my teams also, like, heads up. I felt myself really like hyper anxious. I felt myself thinking the worst of everything. And when I was left alone, I think I felt a lot more down during that week. But maybe Sean was away too, right? I think there were so many other
Oh my
variables.
gosh, neighbor, why didn't you
Yeah,
call me?
yeah, but I felt no, but
I could have
and
sent
then
my
and
handsome
then,
husband
I mean,
to you.
Because
to
she
see
really
me,
wants
to
that.
see me
Yeah.
all bloated. No, but then I also felt really uncomfortable. So I think like day probably like 6, 7 onwards, it was full on like super bloated, right? Really uncomfortable. I think I had to use the bathroom a lot more as well. No, I just felt terribly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And even after the extraction, it's even worse, right? I think only probably like 6 days after,
Yeah.
I feel better, much better
Yeah.
now. My tummy was sort of like, you can really feel the bloat. But I think that feeling of downness and like anxiety and being like very paranoid and very worried about everything, it never hit me so badly.
Because, I mean, if you're
Yeah.
injecting hormones into your body, like it's very clear that your mood is going to shift during that time. Yes, you're going to get side effects that you feel in your body, but I think like a huge part of the egg freezing journey that's not talked about is like the mental health side of
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
And it is directly related to your hormones. You told us earlier you were taking happy hormones during this period too.
Oh yeah, and leading up to that, right? To
Please share with the
to
audience.
help me on my fertility journey. Yeah, and I've been taking it religiously. I follow your tip and hack of mixing that with super greens.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I get 2 in 1.
Yeah.
Yes, she does. I've seen
Yeah.
it in her house.
No, it's such a good hack, and it tastes nice together as well. So
It does.
why not? Yeah.
That I'm drinking that right now, actually.
No, I mean, to be very honest, as somebody who I would like to say I take pride in knowing a reasonable amount about women's health, even though egg freezing has been so spoken about recently, I feel like, you hear it here and there, but actually understanding the journey and like what it takes and the fact that, you had to inject yourself for 2 weeks, but some people only have to do it for 10 days. And
Yeah.
there doesn't seem to be, like, it doesn't have a formula as well. And I think that's so telling of all things women's health, right? Like whether it was your pregnancy journey, your egg freezing journey, somebody else's fertility journey, whether it's someone's periods. It's all so mysterious almost.
Yeah.
And I really think that, I learned so much just from that. I honestly didn't know the entire egg freezing process, but
Yeah, actually, I do have one question. Like, now what? So I guess.
See, that part I'm still learning. I was going to say, like, there's already very little on women's health. I think there's even lesser literature and resource around. If you're also maybe not the majority, like if you're queer, right? To be
Yes,
very honest,
yeah.
right? Like, what do you do after,
Yeah.
right? When it comes to
No, I wanna know,
fertilizing.
yeah.
So I can't do it in Singapore.
Right.
I have to transport my egg then overseas.
Okay.
To do it in a country where it's legal basically.
Okay.
And then I would have to of course find a sperm because we
Right.
don't have a sperm like between two of us.
Yes.
So you find a sperm donor. One of
Yeah.
the bigger sperm banks would be the California Creo Bank, right? That's
Okay.
most common as well.
Yeah.
We tried surfing it. Like you can access it for free first and see some profiles. It's very strange actually. It's like
Yeah.
almost Tinder for sperm, right?
Yeah.
No, because you see
I'm
photos
sure.
of like men in their baby
Important
baby
role.
form.
Yeah.
It's a bit disturbing. It's very weird. It's almost like I
Because
don't
it's
know.
like what.
Yeah.
Are you looking at what they look like, what they do? It's
Yeah.
like there's so
Like their
many
health
factors.
history.
Yeah.
So you get to see everything. We're just in the early stage of browsing, so I haven't paid yet to get past the gated section,
the gated
where then I can
section.
see. I think
The
the adult
real sperm.
photos. I think you can sort of hear the voice notes even. If you want to call, I think for people who are comfortable and open with it, you can actually have a conversation, like an interview, right? Almost.
I am highly aware that it is very expensive
Oh,
to
yeah,
freeze
and
your
it's
eggs in Singapore.
expensive,
And
yes.
storage is extremely
It,
expensive as well.
it is expensive, right? You have to put aside probably. No, because it's elective, so it's elective
Yep.
egg freezing.
Yes.
There are no subsidies, number one. And there's no coverage, of course, for insurance as well. So I think it's minimally, for sure, if they put aside sort of like, maybe the range is probably maybe 10 to $18,000,
Yeah.
right, to freeze your eggs.
and that doesn't count the storage that you pay.
On a yearly
On a
basis.
yearly
Some of it,
right?
it comes with a bundle. So
Okay.
usually when
Yeah.
you start that process, you can pay and you get a bundle of like 1 year to 3
Bundle
years.
discount.
yeah.
Just like when you buy two happy
minimally with a
hormones.
year, yeah, with a year.
I think the whole process is super interesting. I'm like very keenly interested because I'm probably going to go through the same process. And what I found super interesting when I met with my fertility doctor is just talking about fertility rates in general. So I would be looking at egg freezing, particularly because I have PCOS. And knowing that I want to have 2 children. So I'm 30 years old. I probably want my second one. I have no idea when. I don't even know when I'm going to have my first one. And it's actually encouraged to freeze an embryo if you are a straight couple, because that means you're getting both the sperm and the egg in one. That is even more expensive.
Right.
And then in addition to that, it's very interesting to see infertility rates for men because you're taught that, oh my gosh, you're going to age like as a woman. Therefore,
The sperm quality
yes,
goes
and
down.
no one ever talks about male fertility
yes,
and
yes.
how big of a puzzle piece that is to all of this. It's actually a higher individual rate when you look at percentage of men being infertile over women, and then like the most is when actually both have like issues with fertility. So I think that is very interesting as well.
This has been an amazing conversation.
Yeah.
We're so lucky to have both of you as mentors and friends. And I think everybody will truly benefit from this, whether it was the business side of the conversation, the women's health side. If you have more questions about egg freezing, you can slide into Dion's DMs.
Yes. She now has a public Instagram.
We do have 2 last questions.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a Moom podcast, so I'll ask the first one. What is your favorite Moom product and why?
Now super greens. Because I love my greens, but I don't think I get enough of them.
Okay, Rach, what's your
Super
favorite?
Greens is my second favorite. My first favorite is Sleep Well.
Yes.
Wait, what do you mean? You know?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you've texted me
I
for
know,
emergency sleep well stashes.
Yes. No, not only does it help me to adjust whenever I travel for
Yeah.
time difference, okay, it really helps me get deep sleep. And I think it's so important as a parent, even if it's just 4 hours stretch of sleep before Ollie wakes up or Kira wakes up. And I find that Sleep Well gets me there. So I'm very thankful for that. Yeah.
And she loves super greens because
Yeah, why do you love super
Why do you
greens?
love super greens, Rach?
Because I actually, unlike Dione, I do not eat vegetables at all.
Like 0.
Like zero.
At all. In
So
that
I'm so
calming
thankful
voice.
that Super Green it exists and it tastes so good.
What
Yeah.
were you doing before super greens?
That's
Just-
right. Nothing.
just
A
not
brown
just
diet.
eating
It was a
Nothing.
brown diet.
Drinking gin and tonic with Dione. That was what I was doing.
The
Yeah.
cucumber was her extent of greens.
The green. No, she left that out in the gin and tonic.
Appreciate that.
Okay, thank
thank
you.
you.
all. This was a long but very fun and very exciting episode.
Yes, and we cannot wait for everybody to enjoy. Bye.
Thank you.